do not know why it does that. It turns off my sound when I start recording. I have to turn on the sound every single time. Like somehow I want to record without sound because it's so much better. Whatever. Okay, so Graham Hancock.
I think Graham Hancock's crazy. I was actually listening to one of Hancock's things tonight. Right there. He was talking about the mathematical connection of ancient civilizations, and he was bringing Angkor Wat and Egypt together. And the thing that bothered me is he was treating them as if they were in any way contemporaneous with each other. You know how much I love and respect ancient Egyptians, and do think that they have the marks of a very ancient culture in Egypt. But my God, Angkor Wat was built at the same time William Wallace was gallivanting around Scotland.
Much more recent.
Much more recent. You can't say they're in any way contemporaneous with each other. They're not marks of an ancient civilization in Angkor Wat.
Angkor Wat is covered over because the jungle grows so fast there.
Well, I mean, it only takes like 10 years and there's no trace of it left there.
Give me a second.
That happened in South America too.
Really?
Yeah, there are whole cities, a very massive civilization that was there in the rainforest area around the 1400s, maybe as late as the 1600s, but was completely swallowed by the jungle.
Yeah, I think I've seen that.
I've
seen that, and I've seen evidence of the civilization was in St. Louis. What was it called? The Cahokia civilization. But none of those are pre-Christian. They're all post-Christian civilizations, from what I understand.
Cahokia goes back to about 1000 AD. There is the point in Louisiana, which is, I think, 1500 BC.
No doubt. I mean, no doubt.
That one would be a truly ancient civilization, but it's not as ancient as the ones that Hancock is talking about. He's talking about 10,000 BC.
Right. So, no, and that's a good point. He, from what I can tell, does tend to conflate things, and he's very loosey-goosey with his dates, and also, to some degree, he's kind of loose with the complexity of civilization. You know, so for instance, I saw a program for him on the North Sea, which is fascinating, about the submerged culture of the North Sea. And admittedly, there's not a lot of archaeology on the North Sea because it's a very recent discovery. But the discovery of Doggerland does not prove that there was a highly complex civilization in Doggerland. It proves that there were people there, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think Hancock, there's a lot that he wants to be there, and so he thinks that it's there.
Yeah, and I wanted to be there too, but the facts don't bear out that Atlantis ever existed.
What was the one? It was there in the Maldives, was it? Did you see that?
In the Maldives.
Sorry, my mind is making leaps here. Did you see the program on the Neolithic civilization in the Maldives?
No, don't think I did.
I'm pretty sure. Or was it the Azores?
Oh, the Azores. Yes, I have seen that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that? Does he refer to that as Atlantis?
No, he does not. In fact, he doesn't bring that one up.
Okay.
It's not technological enough. It doesn't show the innate knowledge of mathematics that, say, was in Egypt, or even Göbekli Tepe, if you want to go back to 10,000 or 11,000 BC. They knew mathematics.
They did.
The one in the Azores is fascinating because it indicates that they were doing oceanic voyages.
Yes.
At that point in time. Now, that isn't exactly a hop, skip, and a jump off the coast of Africa. You got to do some serious boat work.
Yeah, that's some serious navigation. Did you see the whole series by Graham Hancock?
No, I haven't watched this whole series. I watched snitches of it here and there, and then truthfully he starts to annoy me, so I turn him off.
Just because of his inaccuracy?
Yes, because of his inaccuracies. The stuff he's talking about, there's a lot of really interesting things there, and then he throws in these inaccuracies. I'll also say he also mischaracterizes the archaeological world. He treats it as if all professional archaeologists don't want these things to be true. But they do. They do want it to be true.
Yeah.
You just can't get the evidence for it.
That's another good point about Hancock. He seems a little bit too conspiratorial for me. Like, they are blocking. I don't think there's any they there. I think it's just the
Well, I can think of one case where they are, but it's for an entirely different reason.
Okay, you want to bring that up?
Yeah. Vikings in the Hudson Bay.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we've talked about that. Yeah, that's a very interesting case. Right.
They don't want to bring it up. They being the government of Canada, because they don't want to allow any evidence that another country might have the rights to oil-rich land that's there.
Yes. Right.
So,
yeah, and that I get
I
that.
understand that motive.
Yeah, I get that. But there's no they as in a dark conspiracy of people trying to cover it up because, gee whiz, we don't want people to know. It's more like the apparatus of academia, because academia is a slow business and tedious and full of lots of little bits of research one has to do. And then you get personalities in there, people that have positions or chairs or whatever in their department, and they don't want those things threatened, and so they don't want to pursue certain things. And then you have institutions that finance most of these digs, and they don't want to finance a dig that isn't going to actually produce anything.
Exactly. They do want to have some payout for however much money they put out for it.
Yeah, I think that oh, not Graham Hancock, sorry. Russell.
Carlson?
Randall. Randall Carlson was bringing this up the other day in a podcast. Sorry, Ben, my brain is fucking.
That's all right. You and I are getting elderly, and we both have the COVID jab, so it's our brains.
I can't remember shit.
Here, hang on a second. I'm going to do some surgery for you.
Thanks.
There you go. That helped?
Yeah, that's
all right, guys.
Put a laser into my cerebellum.
The high technology surgery.
Yeah, right. Did it test it with Pfizer?
You were saying Randall Carlson.
So Randall Carlson was bringing that up. He was bringing up the idea about the asteroid strikes, and that if the asteroid strikes do exist, you'd have to have something that would allow the digging, the finding out of whether it's there or not. And most of the places that finance this stuff don't want to go there because there's very little chance they're going to get kickback or payback for it. So, but tell me something. Go back Tepe. Why hasn't it been explored before now? Because it wasn't until like 2009 or something that they started actually exploring that place.
Well, nobody really thought about it so much. I mean, it looked so unremarkable on the surface. As near as I can understand, the people of Göbekli Tepe wound up burying that city on purpose.
Yeah,
the
why?
whole hill there, the entire hill is man-made constructed, I think. Why, I have no idea. But I do know that it had the effect of making it look like a very unremarkable hill in a hilly landscape.
Carlson brings up the idea, this is interesting, let me know what you think of this. He brings up the idea that the civilizations, quote unquote, that we're seeing are actually part of a larger apparatus to study the stars, the planets, the movement of the constellations. And that once they got their thing down, they buried it to preserve it for future generations, knowing something big was going to happen that might be catastrophic and wipe out everything. And he proposed that the other day in one of his programs. What do you think of that idea?
I've heard some of his stuff about, as he calls it, world-destroying floods, though he's very careful to specify that we're not actually talking about an event where the entire planet gets covered with water. But instead, something where a major chunk of a civilization did get inundated by one of these massive glacial floods that happened, which there were these massive glacial floods. They did happen. Or along the Mediterranean, there were a couple of major tsunamis that wiped out all the people that were living in what is now Israel. I understand his point about that. I disagree with him that people tend to remember that and build it into their work.
Okay.
So, I mean, if people actually had thought of that just at that point in time with Göbekli Tepe and said, right now, we're going to preserve it for future civilizations because we expect another flood to happen. If it was done in a very short period of time, I could believe that. I tend to think that it was some massive religious drive, though, that made them choose to abandon that location.
That's a big factor that often is left out by people like Randall because he's very dismissive of religion in general. But I think religious perspective can't be ruled out because it is a huge motivator. It's like philosophy. Philosophical viewpoints or opinions about how we should live are huge motivating factors for people, especially people as a group rather than people as individuals. So
bigger, frankly, than fear motivators.
Yes, I agree. And stronger, more resilient too. So I can see a religious, like the Celts, right? The Celts used to build structures upside down inside the earth, apparently, because they saw them as being structures for the dead, for the underworld, where the real world was existing. That's
a cool thought.
I mean, that's weird, but it's like, that's got to be a religious motivator. That's why else would you do that? It's stupid. You build a building upside down or a building in the earth and nobody goes into it. What are you, idiot? But if you're religious,
the Great Pyramid, which was sealed so that no one could get into it.
The upper tomb.
Yeah. Into which I think no one was ever buried either.
Nope. No one's
but there were all those carvings and paintings on the inside sealed away.
Because they would have been pictures for the dead. That I can see.
Or for the gods. The gods would see.
Right. The world of the gods, the world of the dead, whatever you call it. So I can envision that. But this other thing, which is the monitoring of the celestial bodies. Carlson, I've watched him develop over a few years because I started following him back in the aughts, 16, maybe 17, I think, when he was first posting. He and Graham Hancock. And I haven't read his writings, so that's my lacuna. I haven't read Graham Hancock. But I've seen a number of his videos and heard his podcast. And over time, he's been developing this greater and greater idea. He started with the flood theory, the demise of the creatures, which I buy. I can see that happening. And the evidence is pretty much there.
Yeah.
But then sometime around 2000, I don't know, what would this be? 2018, maybe 2019. Was when I first started hearing him talk about what caused that massive flood, especially in North America. And his hypothesis was that it was a major asteroid strike that burned up the glaciers and caused that flash flood in a day. Which honestly, I buy. Because not only have we experienced asteroid strikes and other meteorite strikes, and they're pretty devastating. But the whole idea of the ice dams deteriorating over time, and so finally one day, boom, they explode. I thought, well, that's possible, but I don't know. It doesn't quite sit well with me. What does sit well with me is that some massive amount of energy was released, and that energy caused the ice dam to burst, and the whole glacial Lake Missoula or whatever emptying onto the plains area. So, to clarify, he moved from that then to start thinking about asteroid strikes in general and whether or not the Earth has experienced anything or could experience anything similar to the Chicxulub event that happened off.
His notion is that they're somewhat more regular asteroid strikes. And I see the evidence for it happening a few times, but I don't see it as regular as I think they call it the nemesis theory. I don't see the evidence for that. In fact, on this the rotting ice versus the asteroid strike ice, since we know these explosions happened in multiple locations, I don't see why it couldn't have happened by both mechanisms.
That's true.
Sometimes one way or the other.
That's true. Granted. It is possible it could happen by both. And when you're looking for an asteroid strike, you gotta have evidence for it. I mean, there's got to be on the one hand the ring. There's got to be the material. There's got to be the kicking of stuff into the atmosphere and falling down evidence. And then of course the corpses and stuff.
Yeah, as there is that kind of evidence for the dinosaur killing.
Right, exactly. The gray line.
Yeah, it's there.
But this is interesting to me because 2019, maybe 2020, that's when he began giving evidence, at least, on his YouTube channels, for the possibility of ancient civilizations monitoring the Leonids, monitoring the movement of the Pleiades. And so I saw this video that he put out maybe last year about how Halloween was itself evidence of this monitoring. Oh, that's another thing that seems to have developed over time with him. I don't know when it was, maybe 2017 or 18. He began, and Hancock also began, to put forth the idea that our myths are actually encoded messages about the movement of the stars. Excuse me for just a minute.
Some of them are.
William.
Trouble with the kids. Hey, who shot me? I fired a thing at the church and it hit me in the back of the head. Yeah, that's karma.
That's too funny.
I'll be up again in just a moment.
Oh my God. Beautiful. Truly beautiful. That was really well done.
You're right back.
I'm here. I'm right behind you. So he just started to develop this idea of the myths being encoded messages to future generations, because the idea is, if you knew something big was going to come, and if you were going to try and get other generations to be ready for this or be aware of this, the only things that would last from an apocalyptic event would be stone on the one hand, and if any humans survived, human stories, right? Because you'd have word of mouth, or you would have something indelible that would outlast the apocalyptic event. Does that?
The story, yes, but people aren't going to build in stone in a time of crisis. You're going to worry, like, where am I going to get some grain to eat?
Right. So it's not a time of crisis that they're building, though. And this is, again, part of what he's stating. It's so the apocalyptic event occurs. An advanced civilization gets reduced to rubble, nothingness, and people scramble for their lives for years. And in that time, they don't have time to really do much, and there isn't much to do with. I mean, there's no materials left. So you're digging stuff out of the ground, and because you can't pass the information on from one generation to the next too easily, things begin to deteriorate, and you lose certain elements of civilization. Because you aren't going to remember, for instance, how to make a double chocolate mocha latte.
I think your sound just got cut.
You what?
Yeah, there you are again. Your sound was cut off.
You aren't going to make a double chocolate mocha latte or pass that knowledge on to your kids in a time of crisis. You are going to pass on to them how to make fire, or how to distill water, things like that. And you might pass on to them stories around the campfire that you felt were important. So stories, especially that had meaning that might, for whatever reason, be connected to the event that you just suffered through. The event that you just suffered through.
It would be funny to me in some ways if the meaning of the Stonehenge Circle was like a recipe for how to make beer.
Yeah, wouldn't that be funny?
It's like, oh, it's a secret hidden writing.
Yeah, right. So you embody in these stone edifices and in the myths the most important stories. And if the civilization thought that one of the most important stories was the story of the cataclysm, they would embed that story. Okay, that's the premise anyway. Now, I mean, there are flaws in that because, for instance, if you survived long enough, would you still retain the connection between the story and the cataclysm? I don't think so. You might tell the story.
I think this goes back to something we were talking about a moment ago, Will. The one that's going to last with you, the one that you're going to want to pass down, really is your religious sense of what it all meant.
Well, yeah, that's right, and that's again where Randall Carlson.
It's not like a survival manual of how to live through it.
Right.
But what did God mean when this happened?
Right, and then again, that's Randall Carlson's flaw. He discounts religious thought in human beings, and I think it's a huge flaw. It's like discounting your left eyeball. You know. Sure, your right eyeball works well, but hell, you have two. So I agree with you. That's what I think is going on with most of those myths. Now, were most of those myths inspired by something? I mean, why the hell not?
That one, yes, I can see that one a lot more easily.
Yeah, why the hell not? I think, a flood, a disease, even an impact. Yeah, I can see that.
All of which would make you spend the rest of your life, hello girls, wondering, why did this happen to me? Why? Why was my life? Why did I have to flee the watery ruins of Daggerland?
Yeah, right. In a day, or the Black Sea.
In a day,
the Black Sea.
Bad day.
Yeah, because the Black Sea filled up very, very fast too.
Yes, it did.
That's right. And then there's the Mediterranean, which apparently had an event like that too.
Yeah, both cases where some giant rock wall collapsed and let the sea in.
Or I suspect maybe more likely an ice wall. But yes.
Well, in the case of the Mediterranean, it really was the rock wall.
Yeah, right there at Gibraltar.
Yeah.
So anyway, my point being, I understand his idea of embedding information in the myths, but I think it's a back-asswards way of looking at it. I think that the myth emerges from some seriously traumatic event. Grandma dies, and you make a myth, Fido gets attacked in the woods by wolves, and so you make a myth. You know what I'm saying? It's not that you make the myth calculated in order to embed some information.
No, because that's not how people come up with stories in the first place.
I don't think they do.
You and I have both told stories to our kids. We've made up stories on the spot.
Yeah.
And you get the basic idea of a theme, and you bring in facts from your real life but into the story. I remember telling a wonderful story about bears to my son.
Right.
Which actually had some things. I mean, they weren't bears. It was me in real life that some of the stuff happened to. But it sounded a lot better when told through bears.
But you're not doing it as a calculated attempt to embed information.
No, I was doing it as a way to make my son smile.
Yeah, right. Or go to sleep, or whatever it is. Right. And I do think I do think that if you look at some of the great stories, the Odyssey, for instance, is one of my favorites. They're taking earlier stories and recrafting them, so there is a sort of passing down of a similar framework or a similar narrative. Now, where did that story come from? The story of the traveling through the Duat and the fight with the Apophis. Where did that come from? I don't know. It's
undoubtedly a much older story.
A much older story.
Like the 1001 Nights.
Yep.
Which, set in an Arabic world, actually is telling stories that go back to the Neolithic era.
Yep. Or the story of Brer Rabbit and Tar Baby, which actually goes back to Buddhist monks in Africa.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating, really. Buddhist story of the demon with the long hair is a Buddhist story where the prince fights this demon that has massively long black hair. And this story was passed on from Buddhist monks who were actually going across Africa, converting the locals. And the tribes there in the middle part of Africa adopted these stories. They didn't become Buddhists, but they adopted the stories. And so when they were enslaved and shipped over to America, they brought with them that story, but it had changed. So the prince had become a trickster figure. And the demon with the black hair, the demon with the long hair, had become a tar baby. But same story. So the original story, Buddhist story, was probably based on an eclipse event. But I don't think that they were making the demon with the long hair in order to tell people about an eclipse.
No, other way around.
Yeah, other way around. I mean, for goodness sakes, you go outside and you say, "Hey, Johnny, look, there's an eclipse." Oh, wow, that's really cool. Yeah, it reminds me of a story. Because the forces of darkness are trying to swallow the forces of light, but the forces of light are tricky and they're able to escape through cleverness. And so we value cleverness, we value light, and we oppose the darkness, and that's why we stand with Brer Rabbit and not with the tar baby.
Yes, and that's, again, it comes back to the religious thing. That's what you're teaching, that you don't stand.
Shit, are you out?
By the way, speaking of ancient stories like that, I was seeing a very interesting argument that the story of the Pleiades actually may be something preceding the Exodus from Africa, because some of the details are that ancient.
Stop. Start again, because you cut out.
You know the story of the Pleiades, about the seven sisters pursued by the giant?
Yeah.
We're seeing an argument that may actually go back as far as almost 100,000 BC.
Wow.
Maybe 50,000 BC, but there's reason to think it goes back 50,000 years before that.
Okay.
In that the story is all over the world, many different cultures, including Australia, which is quite interesting. And that it has retained most of the same features. Seven sisters, the hunter coming after one of them, the god throwing the sisters into the sky to make them safe. The thing that makes it possible that it goes back to 100,000 years ago is that there aren't seven stars in the Pleiades. There's 6 that you can see.
Yeah.
But 100,000 years ago, there were 7 that you could see.
Oh, wow.
So it may actually be so old that Neanderthals would have been telling it.
That's pretty amazing. I would not doubt it. Now, you know that's one of Randall Carlson's pivot points, too. The passing...
No, I hadn't heard talking about that particular one.
So back to this Halloween video and some other videos he's made. The passing through... At some point in the year, we passed through a field of a couple comets, and that's right around the time of the Leonids and the, what's the other one? Pleiad? No, what's the other one? So Leonids and the other one, right around that window there in November. So it's end of October, early November. And we passed through the trail of these things, and all these rocks hit the Earth at that time. Lots of little meteorites passing into our atmosphere, and they burn up in our atmosphere, and this causes the light show of the Leonids, and the other one, which I can't remember because I'm old. But
and you had the vaccine jab.
Yeah, exactly. But they normally come or appear to come out of the Pleiades. That's the direction that they come from. So his thesis is that a big one came out of the Pleiades at one point and slammed into us. Okay. Okay, and that's the event that was an extinction level event that wiped out human civilization, and seems to have done so on a regular basis. So there's a video he does, which actually is kind of fascinating, and I can't vouch for the veracity of it, but he presents the changes in temperature and the rise and fall of human civilization, which seems to have happened a couple times. And it happens roughly every 12 to 14,000 years.
That part is mostly accurate. That's the old nemesis theory that they call it. That there's a hidden galactic object that comes back approximately every 20,000 years or so, bringing chaos with it.
And it's called what?
Then it's called the nemesis theory. That there's a planetary object of some kind, or celestial object of some kind, referred to as the nemesis, that comes back in a long orbit around our sun.
And it's debris.
Comes back approximately every 20,000 years, bringing with it asteroid and cometary debris, and therefore leading to extinction level events and various catastrophic events.
Okay.
But no one's ever found said object. So,
no, and no one's ever found said impact.
Which is why, whereas I find that a fascinating story, a nifty theory, I don't see the evidence for it. And that means that I accept it less well than I accept the Three Bears, which is a story that's got a good meaning to it.
Right, exactly. Well, the other thing to put into that mix is that he posits that there might have been more advanced civilizations prior to a certain point that got wiped out by some extinction level event or bumped back to a Stone Age, and it took them 20,000 years to recover.
Well, I believe that there were the more advanced civilizations. I do see evidence for that.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened to the lost city of Tartessos, for example?
Okay.
Over here, by the way.
Yeah, and I see evidence for it too, and I tend to think that there were more advanced civilizations. What I have a hard time getting my mind around is that there was a civilization, let's say, as advanced as ours, which ours has advanced in a certain direction, which may or may not be good. We'll leave that out for debate. But a civilization that had advanced to our level got slammed. Everything was annihilated because the destruction apparently of even a kilometer wide piece would be pretty huge. And a fragile infrastructure like ours would be pretty much decimated.
I'll tell you what, I'll give you an event that could happen to us that would cause that kind of level and wouldn't leave an impact crater. You know what the Carrington event was?
I've heard the term. Remind me.
A big solar storm back in the 1800s.
Oh, yeah.
So big that telegraph wires worked without electricity on them.
Yeah.
And people could get shocked by it without any noticeable source of electricity. If that were to happen again, and that was only a little less than 150 years ago, it would wipe out every single computer on the planet. Yeah. Your phone, my phone, what we're talking to you right now, all of it. If it's not buried, say, 20 miles down. And without that, we would starve to death very, very quickly without that infrastructure.
Well, we might. We might.
Good.
We might. Now that I pulled that Carrington event, I remember thinking about this. We might. But we have this advantage. We have a lot of stuff written down and how-tos written down. And so we have access to paper, primarily, of how to do certain things that we wouldn't have if there was an extinction level impact event, okay? So this would, if the Carrington event were to occur again, it would fried all our computers and intercommunication, all this. Yeah, it would be bad, no doubt about it. But I think there'd be plenty of people that would still retain the knowledge or have access to the knowledge of being able to how to survive, how to recreate things, and even how to rebuild the technology. it might be slow, but the recovery might be, say, I don't know, 100, 200 years, in my estimation. Which is very different from if you had an impact of a kilometer-large piece of iron hitting us. If you have that, not only would you have the impact itself and the shock of that destroying things, and then the fire burning things, and then you have the collapse of the atmosphere, which would cause a freezing after that, and then you'd have a number of people starving to death or warring with each other, and so you have a lot of death and you have a lot of destruction, and most of the material would be destroyed. That would take a long time to recover from, you know. So a slightly different scenario.
Maybe I'm just not wrapping my brain around that level of destruction.
Yeah, that's hard to do, to be honest, because you got to be ready to be depressed for a day or two. But ultimately, when I got out of my depression, I was able to think and say, okay, look, people could survive it, and so if it did happen in the past, it would take X amount of years to get back on our feet as a race. We would do it in pockets here and there. We would eventually grow, and probably around rivers, and begin using whatever materials were available, skins or bone or wood, and work our way up. And a lot of knowledge would be lost because it wouldn't be written down because all that stuff would be burned. But the knowledge would be retained in the human mind and passed on to people. And people could discover things because we're kind of clever as well as being stupid. So there's a possibility of recovering even from that event. It would just take several thousand years rather than a couple hundred. Do you follow?
I do follow you on that point. I do.
So I could see, say, an event happening several thousand years ago that wiped out an advanced civilization. And the only problem is you couldn't get rid of all the evidence of that civilization. So you'd have to have artifacts of some kind that would show up and say, oh, wow, this is a really advanced civilization. You wouldn't have to find like a motorbike in ancient Egypt. But there would be things.
Yeah, there isn't evidence of like engines and bikes, but there is evidence of magnificent stonework.
Yes, there is.
From that far back.
Yes, there is, absolutely.
I will say, if you went as far back as say the dinosaur era, you actually could get rid of all traces of a technological civilization over that much time, except maybe the chemical traces. That would still remain. But all the other physical traces, there'd be no artifacts left after 65 million years.
No, there would not.
There wouldn't be a fossilized city. There wouldn't even be the lines of a city left in the ground. It'd be moved away at that time.
Right. But that's a long way back.
Well, 10,000 years isn't long enough.
No.
65 million years is.
Yes, it is. And then that kind of raises the question, have we been looking at our own archaeology wrong? Because if, for instance, our way of looking at things frames what we actually end up finding. You know, if we're looking for bicycles, we aren't going to find bicycles or motorcycles. But if we don't know what we're supposed to be looking for to prove, quote unquote, an advanced civilization, we'd have a hard time finding things to prove an advanced civilization.
What the artifact you're looking for would be.
What is it you're looking for? Are you looking for a boat? Because, that's probably going to be destroyed. Nice. See ya.
There we go. Gotta get that boat away to safety.
You're right.
You got a boat to be destroyed.
You saved it. Anyway, Carlson has some neat ideas about this, and I like a lot of what he has to say. The one thing that I have to have a real shield against in terms of my mind is that he is very anti-religion. He's a Mason. Anti-religion. And
weirdly, that had never crossed my mind that he was a Mason until now.
And, God love them, whatever, Mason, but there is a tint that you get. There's a tinge that you get to the way you look at things. On the one hand, you discount religious experience, like we've been talking about, but on the other hand, you don't see providence and you don't see the possibility of things actually going well if you're getting the boat travel. You don't see the possibility of things going well or going your way, or going even God's way, because God doesn't exist. So there is no things go for the better. So not only do you not have the religious sense, you also have no sense that things can be otherwise than just total devastation.
Sorry, your sound cut out for a second or two.
You don't have the sense that things are going to go well in any way except for just total devastation. That was my point. Sorry, I got to go to Ron Dean's boat dock and save this boat. And so anyway, anytime I watch Randall Carlson, I have to bear that in mind. Now, he's pretty good when it comes to things like the climate change, because he really beats up the climatologists.
Yeah.
And for
they
good
deserve
reason.
to, in the sense that they always give this impression that mankind has more control over it than we've actually got. That's the part that's always really bugged me about the climate change.
Yeah, mankind has more control over it, and it's also unprecedented.
No, that's not true.
There's no precedent for this kind of
In fact,
climate catastrophe.
mankind was doing a lot better when the world was warmer.
Yeah. So, and also probably most of the climatologists are invaded by a certain country of unnamed specification.
I don't know what you're talking about, Will.
Yeah. Begins with chin.
I'm going to shoot this statue that was manufactured in China over here.
Sure.
See what happens?
I think anything will happen. I don't think you can destroy it.
No, I'm sorry. I couldn't destroy the manufactured in China statue right there.
No. It's Chinese made, so it's the best. There it is. Can you hit it?
Yes, I did actually.
Wow. So, anyway, the thing that really got me on that whole impact theory thing, it's just the thought that it could happen again, and of course it could, and so one has to say, well, okay, if it does, it does. Do I really want to live beyond that? Do I really want, is life so beautiful on this earth that I have to preserve my ass all the time?
Well, I would honestly like to see our race go to other planets myself, but that's not because I feel that we'll be extinct if we don't. It's more like I think it would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I get you. But even there, our race, people will go to
I'll let the dogs do it if they can do it better.
No, what I mean is people will go to other planets. And there is a certain collective sorrow or joy we feel when our race does something. But on the other hand, when it comes down to it, it's just us as individuals. Our race doesn't care when we get cancer. Our race doesn't care when we get an award at work. So.
Yeah, I see your point on that.
So anyway, I think that there's something to be said about the collective fear of having our race be destroyed, or collective joy of our race doing something. But when it comes down to it, that's not really, I don't know. The day-to-day existence does not involve our race. Oh, my children are still loud.
That's our race right there.
That's our race right there. Our children, who are both blessing and annoyance. I just fell in the water.
Fell in the water?
Yeah. Trying to store this boat in my thing. Well, Ben, we haven't solved everything, but we've solved a lot. So.
We came pretty close to destroying the world.
Yes.
Did you destroy that boat?
You did. Thanks.
It's a pleasure.
Let's go destroy some stuff in general, and then I gotta go to bed. Because I am really beat. It's been really good talking with you, though.
Well, it has. It's really been good talking to you as well. As you say, we didn't solve all the problems in the world, but we had a lot of fun doing it.
We did. Let's go destroy some stuff. I'm going to stop recording. As we say, let's go amp some stuff up.